A reading from the first book of Machabees. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Now it came to pass, after Alexander the son of Philip the Macedonian, who first reigned in Greece, coming out of the land of Sethim, had overthrown Darius the king of the Persians and the Medes. He fought many battles, and took the strongholds of all, and slew the kings of the earth. And he went through even to the ends of the earth, and took the spoils of many nations, and the earth was quiet before him. And he gathered a power and a very strong army, and his heart was exalted and lifted up. And he subdued countries of the nations and princes, and they became tributaries to him. And after these things he fell down upon his bed, and he knew that he should die. And he called his servants, the nobles that were brought up to him from his youth, and he divided the kingdoms amongst them while yet he was alive. And Alexander reigned 12 years, and he died. His servants made themselves kings, every one in his place, and they all put crowns upon themselves after his death, and their sons after the many years, and the evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus the illustrious, the son of King Antiochus, who had been the hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days there went out of Israel wicked men, and they persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathens that are round about us. For since we departed from them, many evils have befallen us, and the word seemed good in their eyes. And some of the people, determined to do this, went to the king, and he gave them the license to do after the ordinances of the heathens. And they built a place of exercise in Jerusalem, according to the laws of the nations. And they made themselves uh, prebuses, and departed from the holy covenants, and joined themselves to the heathens who were sold to do evil. And the kingdom was established before Antiochus, and he had a mind to reign over the land of Egypt, that he might reign over the two kingdoms. And he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots, and with elephants and horsemen, and a great number of ships. And he made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid at his presence, and fled, and many were wounded unto death. And he took the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils of the land of Egypt. And after Antiochus had ravaged the Egypt in 143rd year, he returned and went up against Israel. And he went up to Jerusalem with a great multitude, and he proudly entered into the sanctuary, and took up a golden altar and candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the tables, and the uh, proposition, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and little mortars of gold, and the veil, and the crowns, and the golden ornament that was before the temple, and he broke them all to pieces. And he took the silver and the gold, and the precious vessels, and he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all, he departed into his own country. And he made a great slaughter of men, and spoke very proudly. And there was a great mourning in Israel, in every place where they were. And the princes and the ancients mourned, and the virgins and the young men were made feeble, and the beauty of the women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and the bride that sat in the marriage bed mourned. And the land was moved with inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. And after 2 full years, the king sent the chief collector of his tributes to the city of Judea. And he came to Jerusalem with a great multitude, and he spoke to them peaceable words and deceits, and they believed him. And he fell upon the city suddenly, and struck it with a great slaughter, and destroyed much people in Israel. And he took the spoils of the city, and burned it with fire, and threw down the house thereof, the walls thereof around about. And they took the women captive, and the children, and the cattle they possessed. And they built the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with strong towers, and made it a fortress for them. And they placed there a sinful nation, wicked men, and they fortified themselves therein. And they stored up armor, victuals, and gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem. And they laid up there, and they became a great snare. And this was the place to lie to wait against the sanctuary, an evil devil in Israel. And they shed innocent blood round about the sanctuary, and defiled the holy place. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled away by reason of them, and the city was made in the habitation of strangers. And she became a stranger to her own seed, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary was desolate like a wilderness. Her festival days were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach. Her honors were brought to nothing, but her dishonor was increased according to her glory, and her excellency was turned into mourning. And King Antiochus wrote to all his kingdom, and all the people should be one, and everyone should leave his own law. And all the nations consented according to the word of King Antiochus. And many of Israel consented to his service, and they sacrificed to idols, and they profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by hands of messengers to Jerusalem and to all the cities of Judea, and they should follow the law of the nations of the earth, and they should forbid holocausts and sacrifices, atonements to be made to the temple of God, and they should prohibit the Sabbath and the festival days to be celebrated. And he commanded the holy places to be profaned, and the holy people of Israel. And he commanded the altars to be built, and temples and idols and swine flesh to be emulated, and unclean beasts. And they should leave their children uncircumcised, and let their souls be defiled with uncleanness and abominations, to the end they should forget the law, and should change all justifications of God, and that whoever would not do according to the word of it, King Antiochus should be put to death. According to all these things, all these words, he wrote to his whole kingdom, and he appointed rulers over the people that should force them to do these things. And they commanded the cities of Judea to sacrifice. Then many of the people were gathered to them, they that had forsaken the law of the Lord, and they committed evils in the land. And they drove away the people of Israel into lurking holes, and into secret places of fugitives. Of the 15th day of the month of Celestial, in the 145th year, King Antiochus set up the abominable idol of desolation upon the altar of God. And they built altars throughout all the cities of Judea round about it. And they burnt incense and sacrificed at the doors of the houses and the streets. And they cut in pieces the burnt with fire the books of the law of God. And every one with whom the books of the testament of the Lord was found, and whoever observed the law of the Lord they put to death, according to the edict of the king. Thus, by their power, did they deal with the people of Israel, and they were found in the cities month after month. And on the 25th day of the month, they sacrificed upon the altar of the idol was over against the altar of God. Now the women that circumcised their children were slain, according to the commandment of King Antiochus. And they hanged the children about their necks in all their houses, and those that were circumcised with them they put to death. And many of the people of Israel determined with themselves that they would not eat unclean things, and they chose rather to die than to be defiled with unclean meats. And they would not break the holy law of God, and they were put to death. And there was very great wrath upon the people. In those days rose Matthias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of uh, Jorib, from Jerusalem. He abode in the mountain of Modian, and he had 5 sons: John, who was surnamed Gadius, Simon, who was surnamed Thassi, and Judas, who was Machabees, and Eleazar, who was surnamed Abiram, and Jonathan, who was surnamed Alphus. These saw the evils that were done in the people of Judea and Jerusalem. And Matthias said, Woe is me, wherefore I was born, to see the ruin of my people, and the ruin of the holy city, and to dwell there, when it is given unto the hands of the enemies. The holy places are come into the hands of the strangers. Her temples it is become as a man without honor, and the vessels of her glory are carried away captive. Her old men are murdered in the streets, and her young men are fallen by the sword of the enemies. What nation hath not inherited her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. She was free, is made a slave. And behold, our sanctuary and our beauty and our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have defiled them. And what end then should we live any longer? And Matthias and his sons rent their garments and covered themselves with haircloth and made great lamentation. And they that were sent from the kingdom Antiochus came thither to compel them, were fled into the city of Modin to sacrifice and to burn incense, and to depart from the law of God. And many of the people of Israel consented and came to them, but Matthias and his sons stood firm. And they that were sent from Antiochus answering and said to Matthias, Thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and adorned with sons and brethren. Therefore come thou first, and obey the king's commandment, and all the nations have done, and the men in Judea, and they that remain in Jerusalem, and thou did thy sons shall be in the number of the king's friends, and enriched with gold and silver and many presents. And Matthias answered and said with a loud voice, Although all the nations obey King Antiochus, so as to depart every man from the service of the law of their fathers, and consent to his commandments, I and my sons and my brethren obey the law of our fathers. God be merciful unto us. It is not profitable for us to forsake the law and the justices of God. We will not hearken to the words of King Antiochus, neither will we sacrifice and transgress the commandments of our law to go another way. Now as he left off speaking these words, there came a certain Jew in the sight of all the sacrifices to the idols upon the altar in the city of Modin, according to the king's commandment. And Matthias saw and was grieved, and his reins trembled, and his wrath was kindled. And according to the judge of the law, running upon him, slew him upon the altar. Moreover, the man whom King Antiochus had sent, who compelled them to sacrifice, he slew at the same time, and pulled down the altar. And the zeal and showed zeal for the law as the Phinehas did by Zamri, the son of Salome. And Matthias cried out in a city with a loud voice, saying, every one that hath zeal for the law and maintaineth the testaments, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains, and left all that they had in the city. Then many that sought after judgment and justice went down into the desert, and they abode there, and they and their children, and their wives, and their cattle, because the afflictions increased upon them. And it was told to them, the king's men, and the army that was in Jerusalem, and the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone away into the secret places, into the wilderness, and that many were gone after them. And forthwith they went out toward them, and made war against them on the Sabbath days. And they said to them, do you still resist? Come forth, and do according to the edict of King Antiochus, and you shall live. And they said, we will not come forth, neither will we obey the king's edict to profane the Sabbath day. And they made haste to give them battle, but they answered them not, neither did they cast a stone on them, nor stop up the secret places, saying, let us all die in our innocency, and heaven and earth uh, shall be witnesses for us, that you put us to death wrongfully. So they gave them to battle on the Sabbath, and they were slain with their wives and their children and their cattle, and the number of thousands of persons. And Matthias and his friends heard of it, and they mourned for them exceedingly. And every man said to his neighbor, if we shall all do as our brethren have done, and not fight against the heathens for our lives and our justifications, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. And they will determine in that day, saying, whoever shall come up against us to fight on the Sabbath day, we will fight against them, and we will not all die, as our brethren that were slain in the secret places. Then was assembled to them the congregation of the Sidonians, the stoutest of Israel, every one that hath good will of the law. And they that fled from the evils joined themselves to them, and were a support to them. And they gathered an army, and slew the sinners in their wrath, and the wicked men in their indignation, and the rest fled to the nations for safety. And Matthias and his friends went round about, and they threw down the altars, and there circumcised all the children whom they found in the confines of Israel that were uncircumcised, and they did valiantly. And they pursued after the children of pride, and worked prospered in their hands. And they recovered the law out of the hands of the nations, and out of the hands of the kings. They yielded not the horn to the center. Now the days drew near that Matthias should die, and that his sons and he said to his sons, now hath pride and chastisement gotten strength, and the time of destruction and wrath and indignation. Now therefore, O sons, be ye zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenants of your fathers, and call to remembrance the works of your fathers, which they have done in their generation, and you shall receive great glory and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation, and it was reputed to him unto justice? Joseph in the time of distress kept the commandment, and he was made Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, being uh, prevent fervent in the zeal of God, received the covenants of an everlasting priesthood. Jesus, while he fulfilled the word, was made ruler in Israel. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, received an inheritance. David, by the mercy, obtained the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, while he was still full of zeal for the law, was taken up to heaven. Ananias, Azarias, and uh, Mishael, by believing, were delivered out of the flame. Daniel, in his innocency, was delivered out of the mouth of the lions. And thou can thus consider through all the generations that none that trusted in him fail in strength. And fear not that the words of the sinful man, for his glory is done, or in worms. Today he is lifted up, and tomorrow he shall be not found, because he is returned unto the earth, and his thoughts has come to nothing. You, therefore, my sons, take courage, and have manfully in the law, for by it you shall be glorious. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear to him always, and he shall be a father to you. And Judas Maccabeus, who is valiant and strong from his youth up, let him be the leader of your army, and he shall manage the war of the people. And you shall take to you all that observe the law, and revenge ye the wrong of your people. Render to the Gentiles their reward, and take heed to the precepts of the law. And he blessed them, and was joined to his fathers. And he died in the 146th year, and was buried by his sons in the sepulchres of his fathers in Modin. And all Israel mourned for him with great mourning. Then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him, and all they had joined themselves to his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. And he got his people great honor, and he put on a breastplate as a giant, and girt his warlike armor about in the battles, and protected the camp with his war sword. In his acts he was like a lion, and like a lion's whelp roaring for the prey. He pursued the wicked and sought them out, and then that troubled his people he burnt with fire. And his enemies were driven away for fear of him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled, and salvation prospered in his hand. And being grieved, many kings had made Jacob glad with his works, and his memory to be blessed forever. And he went through the cities of Judea, and destroyed the wicked out of them, and turneth away wrath from Israel. And he was renowned even to the utmost parts of the earth, and he gathered to them that were perishing. And Apollonius gathered together the Gentiles and numerous and a great army from Samaria to make war against Israel. And Judas understood it, and went forth to meet him, and he overthrew him and killed him. And many fell down slain, and the rest fled away. And he took the spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius, and fought with it all his lifetime. And Saron, captain of the army of Syria, heard that Judas had assembled a company of faithful and the congregation with him. And he said, I will get me a name, and I will be glorified in the kingdom, and I will overthrow Judas and those that are in with him that have despised the edict of the king. And he made himself ready, and the hosts of the wicked went up with him, strong succors to be revenged of the children of Israel. And they reproached even as far as the brethren, and Judas went forth to meet with him with a small company. And when they saw the army uh, coming to meet him, they said to Judas, how shall we, being few, be able to fight against so great a multitude and so strong? And we are ready to faint with fasting today. And Judas said, it is easy matter for many to be shut up in the hands of the few. There is no difference in the sight of God of heaven to deliver the great multitude or the small company. For the success of a war is not in the multitude of the army, but the strength cometh from heaven. They come against us with insolence, multitude, and with pride to destroy us, and our wives and our children, and taking our spoils. But we will fight for our lives and our laws, and the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. But as for you, fear them not. And as soon as he had made an end of speaking, he rushed suddenly upon them, and Saron and his hosts were overthrown before him. And he pursued him by the descents of uh, Bethoron, even to the plain, and there fell of them 800 men, and the rest fled into the land of the Philistines. And the fear of Judas and his brethren, and the dread of them fell upon all the nations round about them. And his fame came to the king, and all the nations told the battles of Judas. Now when King Antiochus heard these words, he was angry in his mind, and he sent and gathered the forces of all his kingdom, an exceedingly strong army. And he opened this treasury and gave out pay to the army for a year, and he commanded them that they should be ready for all things. And he perceived that the money of the treasury failed, and that the tribunes of the country were small because of the dissension and the evil that had been brought unto the land, and that he might take away the laws of old times. And he feared that they should not have as formerly enough for the charges and gifts which had been given before a liberal hand, and for the he had abounded more than the kings that had been before him. And he was greatly perplexed in mind, and proposed to go to Persia, and to take tribunes of the countries, and to gather much money. And he left Lysias, a nobleman of royal blood, to oversee the affairs of the kingdom from the Euphrates even to the river of Egypt, and to bring up him his son Antiochus till he came up again. And he delivered to him half of the army, the elephants, and he gave him charge concerning all that he would have done, and concerning the inhabitants of Judea and Jerusalem, and that he would send an army against them to destroy the root out of the strength of Israel, and the remnant of Jerusalem to take away the memory of them that were on that place. And they that should battle or should settle strangers to dwell in all their coasts, and divide their lands by lots. So the king took the land, and took half of the army, um, that remained and went forth from Antioch, the chief city of the kingdom, in 147 year. He passed over the river Euphrates and went through the higher countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dor- Doromenius, and Nicanor and Gorgias, mighty men of the king's friends. And he sent with them 40,000 men and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judea to destroy it, according to the king's orders. So they went forth with all their power and came and pitched near Emmaus in the plain country. And the merchants of the countries heard the flame of them. They took silver and gold in abundance and servants, and they came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves, and they were joined to them for the forces of Syria and the land of the strangers. And Judas and his brethren saw the evils were multiplied, and that the armies apprehended or approached to their borders, and they knew the orders the king had given to destroy the people and utterly abolish them. And they said to every man to the neighbor, let us rise up and low condition of our people, and let us fight for our people in our sanctuary. And the assembly was gathered, and that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Now Jerusalem was not inhabited, but was like a desert, and there was none of her children that went in or out, and the sanctuary was trodden down, and the children of the strangers were in the castle, and there was an habitation of the Gentiles, and joy was taken away from Jacob, and the pipe and the harp ceased there, and their assembly together came to Masphia, over against Jerusalem. For in Masphia was a place of prayer before Israel. Before, it was prayer heartfelt in Israel. And they fasted that day and put on haircloth and put ashes upon their heads and rent their garments. And they laid upon the books of the law when in which the Gentiles searched for the likeness of their idols. And they brought the priestly ornaments and the firstfruits and the tithes, and stirred up the Nazarites. And they had fulfilled their days. And they cried with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, what shall we do with those, and whither shall we carry them? For thy holies are trodden down, and are profaned, and thy priests are in mourning, and are brought low. And behold, the nations come together against us to destroy us. Thou knowest what thy intended against us. How shall we be able to stand before their face, unless thou, O God, help us? Then they sounded with trumpets and cried out with a loud voice. And after this, Judas appointed captains over the people, over thousands, and over thousands, and over fifties, and over hundreds, and over tens. And he said to them that they were building up houses, or had betrothed wives, and were planting vineyards, and were fearful that they should return every man to his house according to the law. So they removed the camp and pitched on the south side of Emmaus. And Judas said, gird yourselves and be valiant men, and be ready against the morning, that they may fight with these nations that are assembled against us to destroy us in our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to see the evils of our nation and of the holies. Therefore, as it shall be the will of God in heaven, so be it done. Then Gorgias took 5,000 men and 1,000 of his best horsemen, and they removed out of the camp by night, and they might come upon the camp of the Jews, and strike them suddenly. And the men that were in the castle were their guides. And Judas heard of it, and he rose up, he and his valiant men, to attack the king's forces that were in Emmaus. For as the army was yet dispersed from the camp, Gorgias came by night into the camp of Judas, and found no man. And he sought them, the inhabitants, for he said, These men flee from us. And when it was day, Judas showed himself in plain with the 3,000 men only, who neither had armor nor swords. And they saw the camp of the Gentiles that were strong, and the men of the breastplates, and the horsemen round about them that were trained up to war. And Judas said to the men that were with him, Fear ye not, multitude, neither be ye afraid of their insults. Remember in what manner our fathers were saved in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with a great army. And now let us cry to heaven, and the Lord will have mercy on us, and will remember the covenant of our fathers, and will destroy this army before our face this day. And all the nations shall know that there is one that redeemeth and delivereth Israel. And the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming against them, and they went out of the camp to the battle, and they that were with Judas sounded the trumpet, and they joined battle, and the Gentiles were routed and fled into the plain, but all the hindmost of them fell by the sword, and they pursued them as far as the Gezeron, and even to the plains of Idumea, and to Astotus, and of Gemni, and they fell of them the number of 3,000 men. Judas returned again with his army and followed him. And he said to the people, Be not greedy of the spoils, for there is war before us, and Gorgias and his army are near us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies, and overthrow them, and ye shall take the spoils afterwards with safety. And as Judas was speaking these words, behold, part of them appeared looking forth from the mountain, and Gorgias saw with his men were put to flight, and they that had set fire to the camp. For the smoke was seen, declared what was done. And when they had seen this, they were seized with great fear, seeing at the same time Judas and his army in the plain ready to fight. So they all fled away into the land of the strangers. And Judas returned to take the spoils of the camp, and they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and the great riches. And returning home, they sung a hymn and blessed God in heaven, because he is good, because his mercy endureth forever. So Israel had a great deliverance that day, and such of the strangers as escaped went and told Lysias all that had happened. And when he had heard these things, he was amazed and discouraged, because these things had not succeeded in Israel according to his mind, and the king had commanded. So the year following, Lysias gathered together 3,000 chosen men, and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. And they came to Judea, and pitched their tents in the Betharon. And Judas met with them 10,000 men, that they saw that the army was strong, and he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Saviour of Israel, who didst break the violence of the mighty by the hand of thy servant David, and didst deliver up the camp of the strangers into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hands of thy people, and let them be confounded in their host and their horsemen. Strike them with fear, and cause their boldness to and their strength to languish, and let them quake at their own destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all that know thy name praise thee with hymns. And they joined battle, and there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. And when Lysias saw that his men were put to flight, and how bold the Jews were, that they were ready to either live or die manfully, he went to Antioch, and chose soldiers that they might come again to Judea with greater numbers. Then Judas, his brethren, said, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up now to cleanse the holy places and repair them. And all the army assembled together, and they went up to the mountain Sion. And they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burnt, and the shrubs growing up in the courts as the forests, or in the mountains, and the chambers joining to the temple burnt, thrown down. And they rent their garments, and made great lamentation, and put on ashes on their head. And they fell down to the ground on their faces, and they sounded with the trumpets of alarm, and they cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed men to fight against them that were in the castle till they had cleansed their holy places. He chose priests without blemish, who was set upon the law of God. And they cleansed the holy places, and took away the stones that had been defiled unto an unclean place. And he considered about the altar of the holocaust that had been profaned, what he should do with it. And a good counsel came unto the minds to pull it down, lest it should be reproached to them, because the Gentiles had defiled it. And they threw it down, and they laid up the stone in the mountain of the temple in the convenient place, till should come a prophet that give another covering them. And they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former. And they built up the holy places, and the things that were within the temple. They sanctified the temple and the courts, and they made holy vessels, and brought in the candlestick and the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. And they put incense upon the altar, and lighted up the lamps that were upon the candlestick, and they gave light in the temple. And they set the loaves upon the table, and hung up the veils, and finished all the works they had begun to make. And they arose before the morning on the 5th and the 20th day of the month, which is the month of Shalef, in the 149th year, and they offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar holocaust which they had made, and according to the time, and according to the day wherein the heathens had defiled it. In the same was dedicated a new with canticles and harps and lutes and cymbals. And all the people fell upon their faces and adored and blessed up to the heaven him that prospered them. And they kept the dedication of the altars 8 days. And they offered holocausts with joy and sacrificed salvation and praise. And they adorned with the front of the temple with the crowns of gold and the es- Eshkanonians, and they had re- renewed the gates and the chambers and hanged the doors upon them. And they were exceedingly great joy among the people, and the reproach of the Gentiles was turned away. And Judas and his brethren and all the church of Israel decreed that the day of dedication of the altar should be kept in season from year to year, 8 days from the 5th and 7th day of the month of Chelub, with the joy and gladness. They built up also at the time Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should at any time come up and tread it down as they did before. And he placed a garrison there to be kept it, and he fortified it and to secure the Bethura, that the people might have defense against Douay. Now it came to pass when the nations round about heard the altar and the sanctuary were built up as before, they were exceedingly angry, and they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that were amongst them, that began to kill some of the people and to persuade them. Then Judas fought against the children of Eshu and Idumea, and them that were the uh, Archbathanim, because they beset the Israelites round about. And he made a great slaughter of them. And he remembered the malice of the children of Ben, who were a snare and a stumbling block to the people, by the lying in wait for them in the way, and they were shut up by him in the towers. And he set upon them and devoted them to utter destruction, and burnt their towers with fire and all that were with them. Then he passed over the children of Ammon, where he found the mighty power and much people, and Timotheus, and was the captain. And he found many battles with them, and they were discomfited in their sight, and he smote them. And he took the city of Gazer and her towns, and returned into Judea. And the Gentiles that were in the Galaad assembled themselves together against the Israelites that were in their quarters to destroy them. And they fled into the fortress of Death Heman. And they sent letters to Judas and to his brethren, saying that the heathens that are round about gathered together against us to destroy us. They are preparing to come and take the fortress into which we are fled to Timotheus, the captain of the host. Now therefore come and deliver us out of their hands. And many of us are slain, and all of our brethren were in the places of Tubin were killed, and carried away their wives and their children, the captives, taken their spoils, and they have slain there almost 1,000 men, And while they were yet reading these letters, behold, there came another messenger out of Galilee with their garments rent, and who related according to these words, saying that they of Ptolemaeus and Tyre and Sidon were assembled against them, and all Galilee is filled with strangers in order to consume us. Now, when Judas and his people heard these words, a great assembly met together to consider that they should do for their brethren that were in trouble and were assaulted by them. And Judas said to Simon his brother, choose these men, and go and deliver thy brethren in Galilee. And I and my brother Jonathan will go unto the country of Gilead. And he left Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azarias the captains of the people, and with the remnant of the army of Judea to keep it. And he commanded them, saying, take ye the charge of this people, but make no war against the heathens till we return. Now 3,000 men were allotted to Simon to go to Galilee, and 8,000 to Judas to go into the land of Gilead. And Simon went into Galilee and fought many battles with the heathens, and the heathens were discomfited before his face, and pursued them even to the gates of Ptolemaeus. And there fell of the heathens almost 3,000 men, and took the spoils of them. And he took with them that were in Galilee, and Arabatius, their wives and their children, and all that they had, and brought them into Judea in a great joy. And Judas Maccabeus and Jonathan his brother passed over the Jordan, and went 3 days' journey through the desert. And Nabuthanians met them, and received them in a peaceful manner, and told them that all that happened to their brethren in the land of Gilead, and that many of them were shut up in Bar-Raza and Bozor and Elimia and in Casphor and in Megath and in Carnium, and all these strong and great cities, yea, and that were kept up, shut up in the rest of the cities of Gilead. And they had appointed to bring their army on the morrow near these cities, to take them and destroy them all in one day. Then Judas and his army suddenly turned their march into the desert to Bozor, and took the city, and he slew every male by the edge of the sword, and took all their spoils and burned it with the fire. And they removed from thence by night, and went till they came to the fortress. And it came to pass that the early in the morning, when they lifted up their eyes, behold, there were people without number, carrying ladders and engines to take their fortresses and assault them. And Judas saw that the fight was begun, and the cry of battle went up to heaven like a trumpet, and a great cry out of the city. And he said to his host, fight ye to the day for your brethren, and come with 3 companies behind them. And they sounded their trumpets, and cried out in prayer. And the host of Timotheus understood that it was Machabees, and they fled away before his face, and made a great slaughter of them. And there fell of them that day almost 8,000 men. And Judas turned aside Masphia, and assaulted and took it, and he slew every one of them every male thereof, and took the spoils thereof, and burnt it with fire. From hence he marched and took the Casrion, and Megath, and Bozor, and the rest of the cities of Galaad. And after the Timotheus gathered another army, and camped over against the Raphaim beyond the torrent, and Judas sent men to view the army. They brought him word, saying, all the nations that are round about us are assembled unto him an army exceedingly great. And they that were hired the Armenians to help them, they that pitched their tents beyond the torrent, ready to come to fight against thee. And Judas went to meet them. And Timotheus said to the captains of his army, when Judas and his army come near the torrents of the water, if he pass over us first, we shall not be able to withstand him, for he will certainly prevail over us. But if he be afraid to pass over the camp on the other side of the river, we will pass over them and shall prevail against him. Now, when Judas came near the torrent of the water, he sent the scribes of the people by torrent, and commanded them, saying, suffer no man to stay behind, but let all come to the battle. And he passed over to them first, and all the people after them. And all the heathens were discomfited before them, and they that threw away their weapons, and fled the temple that was in Carnium. And he took that city and the temple, and he burnt with fire with all the things that were therein. And Carnium the subdued, and could not stand against the face of Judas. And Judas gathered together all the Israelites that were in the land of Gilead, and from the least even to the greatest of their wives and their children, and their army exceedingly great, to come into the hand of Judah. And they came as far as Ephraim, and this was the great city situated in this way, strongly fortified, and there was no means to turn from it, on the right hand or on the left, but the way was through the midst of it. And they that were in the city shut themselves in, and stopped at the gates and with stones. And Judas sent them with peaceful words, saying, let us pass through your land to go to our country, and no man shall hurt you. We will only pass through on foot. But they would not open them. Then Judas commanded proclamation to be made to the camp, that they should make no assaults they should make an assault every man in his place was where he was. And the men of the army drew near and assaulted the city all the day and all the nights, and the city was delivered into his hands. And they slew every male with the edge of the sword, and razed the city, and took the spoils thereof, and passed through all the city over that which were slain. And they passed over the Jordan to be a great plain, and that's over against Bethsan. And Judas gathered together the hindmost, and he exhorted the people all the way through till they came into the land of Judah, and they went into the Mount Zion with joy and gladness, and offered holocausts, because not one of them was slain till they had returned in peace. Now in the days of Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Galaad, and Simon his brother in Galilee, before Polemius, Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azarias, captain of the soldiers, heard of the good success in the battles that were fought. And he said, "Let us also get a name. Let us go and fight against the Gentiles that are round about us." And he gave charge to them that were in his army, and they went towards Gemini. And Gorgias and his men went out of the city and gave them battle. And Joseph and Azarias were put to flight, and they were pursued into the borders of Judea, and they fell on that day of the people of Israel, about 2,000 men, and there was a great overthrow of the people, because they did not hearken to Judas and his brethren, thinking that they should do manfully, but they were not of the seed of those men of whom salvation was brought to Israel. And the men of Judea were uh, magnified exceedingly in the sight of all of Israel, and all the nations were wherein their name was heard, and the people assembled to them with joyful acclamations. Then Judas and his brethren went forth and attacked the city of the children of Esau, and the land toward the north south, and he took the Shebaron and her towns, and he burnt the walls thereof and the towers all round it. And he removed the camp to go into the land of the aliens, and went he went through Samaria. And that day some of the priests fell in battle, while desiring to do manfully, they went out unadvisedly to fight. And Judas turned to Astodias into the land of the strangers, and he threw down their altars, and he burnt these statues of their gods with fire. And he took the spoils of the cities, and returned into the land of Judah. Now King Antiochus was going through the higher countries, and he heard the city of Elymais in Persia was greatly renowned and abounding in silver and gold. And there was a temple exceedingly rich, and covering of gold, and breastplates and shields, which the king Alexander, son of Philip of the Macedonian, that reigned first in Greece, had left there. Lo, he came and sought to take the city and to pillage it, but was not able, because the design was known to them that they were in the city. And they rose up against him in the battle, and he fled away from thence, and he departed with great sadness, and returned towards Babylonia. Whilst he was in Persia, there came out one that told him how the armies that were in the land of Judea were put to flight. And Lysias went with a very great power, and was put to flight before the face of the Jews, and that they were grown strong by the armor and power and store of spoils which they had gotten out of the camps which they had destroyed. They that had thrown down the abomination which had yet set upon the altar of Jerusalem, and they that had passed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and Bethshura also his city. And it came to pass that when the king heard these words, and he was struck with fear and exceedingly moved, and he laid himself down upon his bed, and he fell sick for grief, because it was not fallen out of him as he had imagined. And he remained there many days, for great grief came more and more upon him. And he made an account that he should die. And he called for all his friends and said to him, Sleep is gone from my eyes, and I am fallen away, and my heart is cast down for anxiety. And I said to my heart, Unto how much tribulation am I come, unto what floods of sorrow, wherein now I am? I was pleasant and beloved in my power, but now I remember the evils that I have done in Jerusalem and fronts and whence also I took away all the spoils of gold and silver that were in, and I sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without cause. I know though I know therefore that for this cause these evils have found me, and behold, I perish with great grief in strange land. Then he said Philip, one of his friends, and he made his regent over all his kingdom. And he gave him the crown and his robe and his ring, and that he should go to Antiochus his son, and should bring him up for his kingdom. So King Antiochus died there in the year 149, and Lysias understood the king was dead, and he sent up Antiochus his son to reign, who was brought up young, and he called his name Upator. Now, when they were in the castle, uh, had shut up the Israelites round about the holy places, they were in continually seeking their hurt and strengthening of the Gentiles. And Judas purposed to destroy them. He called together all the people to besiege them, and they came together and besieged him. In a year 150, they made battering slings and engines, and some of the besieged got out, and some wicked men of Israel joined themselves unto them. And they went to the king and said, How long dost thou delay the execution of judgments, and to revenge our brethren? We determined to serve thy father, and to do according to his orders, and to obey his edicts. And for this they of our own nation are alienated from us, and have slain as many of us as they could find, and have spoiled our inheritance. Neither have they put forth their hand against us only, but also against all of our orders. And behold, they have approached this day to the castle of Jerusalem to take it, and they have fortified the stronghold of Bethshura. And unless thou speedily prevent them, they will do greater things than these, and thou shalt not be able to subdue them. And when the king heard this, he was angry, and he called together all his friends and captains of his army, and them that were over the horsemen. And there came into him from from the other realms and from the islands and the seas hired troops, and the number of his army was 100,000 footmen and 20,000 horsemen and 32 elephants trained to battle. And they went through Idumea and approached Bethshura, and they fought many days and made engines, but they sailed forth and burnt them with fire and fought manfully. And Judas departed from the castle and removed the camp of Beth uh, Zachariah against the king's camp. And the king rose before us was light, and made his troops march fiercely toward the way of Beth Zarkarium, and his armies made themselves ready for the battle. And they sounded the trumpets, and they showed the elephants, and the blood of grapes, and the mulberries, and provoked them to fight. And they distributed the beasts by the legions, and there stood by every elephant 1,000 men, and the coats of mail, and the helmets of brass, and their uh, heads 5,000 for 500,000 horsemen set in order went chosen for every beast. These before the time whereover the beast was, they were there, and whithersoever it went, they went, and they departed not from it. And upon the beast there were strong wooden towers, which covereth every one of them, and engines upon them, and upon every 32 valiant men, who fought above, and an Indian to rule the beasts. And the rest of the horsemen, and the place of the side on the side of the two wings, and the trumpets to stir up the army, and to hasten them forward that stood thick together in the legions thereof. And when the sun shone upon the shields of gold, and brass, and the mountains, and glittereth therefore, they shone like lamps of fire. And part of the king's army was distinguishingly by the high mountains, and other parts of the low places, and they were marched on warringly and orderly. And all the inhabitants of the land were moved at the noise of the multitudes, and marching in the companies, and uh, rattling of armor, for the army was exceedingly great and strong. And Judas and his army drew near for the battle, and there fell of the king's army 6,000 men. And Eleazar the son of Serah saw one of the beasts harnessed with the king's harness, and it was higher than the other beasts, and it seemed to him that the king was on it, and he exposed himself to deliver his people and to get himself an everlasting name. And he ran up to it and boldly in the midst of the legion, killing on the right hand and the left hand. They fell by him on this side and that side, and when he went between the feet of the elephant and put himself under it and slew it, and it fell to the ground upon him, he died there. Then they, seeing the strength of the king and the fierceness of his army, turneth away from them. But the king's army went up against them to Jerusalem, and the king's army pitched their tents against Judea and Mount Zion. And he made peace with them that were in Bethshurah, and they came forth out of the city, because they had vegetables being shut up there, and for it was the year of the rest to the land. And the king took Bethshurah, and he placed there a garrison to keep it. And he turned his army against the sanctuary for many days, and he set up there battering slings, and engines, and instruments to cast fire, and engines to cast stones, and javelins, and pieces to shoot arrows and slings. And they made engines against their engines, and they fought for many days. But there were no victuals in the city, because it was the 7th year, and such as they had stayed in Judea of them that came amongst the nations, had eaten the residue of all that which had been stored up. And there remaineth in holy places but a few, for the famine had prevailed over them, and they were dispersed, every man to his own place. Now Lysias heard that Philip, whom was King Antiochus while he lived, had appointed to bring up his son Antiochus to reign to be king, was returned to Persia from Persia and Media, and the army that went with him, and he sought to take upon him the affairs of the kingdom. Wherefore he made haste to go and say to the king and to the captains of the army, we decay daily, and our provision of victuals is small, and the place that we lay siege is strong, and lieth upon us take order to for the altars for the affairs of the kingdom. Now, therefore, let us come to an agreement that these men, and make peace with them, and with all the nations. Uh, covenant, uh, let us covenant with them, that they may live according to their own laws, and as before. For because of our despising their laws, they have been provoked and have done all these things. And the proposal was acceptable to the sight of the king, and was the uh, principal princes, and he sent to them to make peace, and they accepted it. And the king and the princes swore to them, and they came out of the stronghold. And the king entered into the mountain of Zion, and saw the strength of the palace, and he quickly broke the oath he had taken, and gave a commandment to throw down the wall round it about. And he departed in haste, and returned to Antioch, where he found Philip, master of the city, and he fought against him, and took the city. In 151st year, Demetrius, the son of Seclucius, departed from the city of Rome, and came up with a few men into the city of the sea coast, and reigned there. And it came to pass, as they entered into the house of the kingdom of the fathers, that the army seized upon Antiochus and Lysias to bring them unto him. And when he knew it, he said, let me not see their face. So the army slew them, and Demetrius upon the throne of his kingdom. There came to him the wicked and ungodly men of Israel. Alchemius was the head of them, who was desired to be made high priest. And they accused the people to the king, saying, Judas and his brethren have destroyed all thy friends, and he hath driven us out of our land. Now therefore send some man with through whom through trusteth, and let him go and see all the havoc he hath made amongst us and the king's lands, and let him punish all the friends and their helpers. Then the king chose Bacchides, one of the friends that ruled beyond the great river of the kingdom, and was faithful to the king. He sent him to see the havoc that Judas made, and the wicked Alchemus was made high priest, and commanded him to be take revenge upon the children of Israel. And they arose and came into the great army into the land of Judea, and they sent messengers and spoke to the Judas and his brethren his peaceful words deceitfully. But they gave no heed to their words, for they saw that they were come with a great army. Then they were assembled to Archias and Bacchides, the company of the scribes, to require things that were just. And the first, the Assyrians that were amongst the children of Israel, and they that sought peace of them. For they said, one that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come, and he will not deceive us. And he spoke to them peacefully, and he swore to them, saying, we will do you will do you no harm, nor your friends. And they believed him, and they took the threescore of them and slew them in the one day, according to the word that is written. The flesh of thy saints and the blood of them they have shed round uh, about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. Then fear and trembling came upon all the people, for they said, there is no truth, there is no justice amongst them, for they have broken their covenants and the oath which he had made. And Bacchides removed the camp from and Bacchides removed the camp from Jerusalem and pitched Beth Zekah, and and took many of them that were fled away from him, and some of the people he killed and threw them down into a great pit. And he committed the country to Alchimus or Alchemus, and left him with the troops to help him. So Chides went away to the king, but Chimus, Chimus did what he could to the mountain, his chief priesthood, and they had disturbed the people, resorted to him, and they got the land of Judah unto their power, and they did much hurt to Israel. And Judah saw all the evils that Chimus and they that were with him did to the children of Israel much more than the Gentiles. And he went out into all the coasts of Judea round about, and took vengeance upon the men that had revolted, and they ceased to go forth any more into the country. Chamos saw the Judas, and that they were with him prevailed, and he knew that he could not stand against them, and he went back to the king and accused them of many crimes. And the king sent Nicanor, one of his principal lords, who had great um, enemy to Israel, and commanded him to destroy the people. And Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a great army, and he sent Judas and his brethren deceitfully with friendly words, saying, let there be no fighting between me and you, and I will come with a few men to see your faces with peace. And he came to Judas, and they saluted one another peacefully, and the enemies were betrayed to take away Judas by force. And the thing was known to Judas that he was come to him with deceit, and he was much afraid of him, and did not see his face any more. And Nicanor knew that his counsel was discovered, and that he went out of the flight against Judas near Capphar Salamana, and there fell of Nicanor's men almost 5,000 men, and they fled into the city of David. And after Nicanor went up into Simon or Mount Zion, and came to the priests, and the people came out to salute him peacefully, to show him the holocaust that were offered for the king. And he mocked and despised them, and abused them, and he spoke proudly, and swore in anger, saying, "Unless Judas and his army be delivered into my hands, as soon as they return in peace, I will burn this house." And he went out in a great rage. And when the priests went in and stood before the face of the altar in the temple, and weeping, they said, "Thou, O Lord, hast chosen this house for thy name to be called upon. Therein they might be a house of the prayer and supplication for thy people. Be avenged of this man and his army, and let them fall by the sword. Remember their blasphemies, and suffer them not to continue any longer." Then Nicanor went out from Jerusalem, and encamped near Bethoron, and the army of Syria joined him. And Judas pitched in Adarsa with the 3,000 men, and Judas prayed and said, "O Lord, when they that were sent by King Sennacherib blasphemed thee, an angel went out and slew of them 185,000, even to destroy this army in our sight today. Let us rest know thee hath spoken ill against thy sanctuary, and judge thou him according to his wickedness." And the armies joined battle on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and the army of Nicanor was defeated, and himself was slain in the battle. And when the army saw that Nicanor was slain, they drew away their weapons and fled, and they pursued after them that were a day's journey from Adezer, even until the came to move to Gaziar. And they sounded the trumpets after them, the signals, and they went forth out of all the towns of Judah round about. They pushed them with the horns, and they turned again to them, and they were all slain with the sword, and there was not left one of them so much as one. And they took the spoils of them for the booty, and they cut off Nicanor's head and his right hand, which he had proudly stretched out, and they brought it, and they hung it up over against Jerusalem. And the people rejoiced exceedingly, and they spent that day with great joy, and ordained that this day should be kept forever, being the 13th of the month of Adar. And the month of Judah was quiet for a short time. Chapter 8. Now Judas heard of the fame of the Romans, that they are powerful and strong and willing to agree to the things that were requested of them, and whatever have come to them, they made a enmity with them, and that they might have mighty power. And they heard their battles and their noble acts which he had done to God, or done to Galactica, and that they had conquered them. He brought them into under their tribune, and how great things they had done in the land of Spain, and they had brought under their power the mines of silver and gold that are there, and had gotten possession of all the places by their counsel and their patience, and had conquered places that were very far off from them. And the kings that came against them from the ends of the earth had overthrown them with the great slaughter, and the rest of the pay them tribute every year. And they that were defeated in battle, Philip and Purchas, the king of the Cretans, and the rest that had borne the arms against them, had conquered them. And how Antiochus, the great king of Asia, who went to fight against them, having 120 elephants, with horsemen and chariots and a very great army, was routed by them. And how they took him alive, and appointed him, that both he and they should reign over him, and should pay a great tribute, and he should give hostages, that which were agreed upon. And the country of the Indians said of the Medes and the Ladinians, some of their best provinces, and these which they had taken from them they gave to the king of Eumenes, and they were in Greece had a mind to go and destroy them, and they had the knowledge thereof. And they sent a general against them, and fought with them, and many of them were slain, and they carried away their wives and their children, and their captives, and their spoils them, and took the possession of the land, and threw down their walls, and brought them to their servants into the city, into other kingdoms and the islands, and any time had resisted them, that they might be destroyed and brought under their power. But with their friends and such relied upon them, that they kept enmity, and conquered kingdoms that were near. They were far off, for all heard their name, were afraid of them, that when they had a mind to keep a kingdom, to help a kingdom, those who reigned, and whom they would, they disposed from the kingdom, and they were greatly exalted. Now of all there were a crown, and was clothed with purple, to be magnified thereby. And when they had made themselves a senate house, consulted daily 120 men, they sat in the council always for the people, and they might do the things that were right. and that they committed their government to one man every year to rule over all their country, and obey all obey me, or will obey one. And there is no envy nor jealousy amongst them. So Judas chose Epaphroditus, Eupolymus, the son of Judah, John, the son of Jacob, and Jason, son of Eleazar, and he sent them to Rome. And he took a league of mighty enmity and uh, conspiracy with them, that they might take off from them that yoke of the Croatians. For there was they that were oppressed the kingdom of the Israel with servants, and they went to Rome. And the very long journey, they entered into the Senate house and said, Judas Maccabeus and his brethren and the people of Judas have sent us to you to make an alliance with peace to you. They may be registered your confraternties and friends. And the proposal was pleasing to their sights. And this was the copy of the writing that they wrote back, graven the tablets of brass and the set uh, and set to Jerusalem, that they might be with them there for a memorial of the peace and the alliance. Good success be to the Romans. And the people of the Jews by the sea and the land for the forever and forever, and far be the sword and the enemy from them. But if there be a first any war upon Romans or any of their confederates in all the dominions, nations of the nations of the Jews will help them according to the time, shall direct with all their heart. Neither shall they give them whilst they were fighting, and furnish them with the wheat and the arms and the money and the ships, as they hath seemed good to the Romans, and they shall obey the their orders, and without asking, without taking anything from them. In the like manner, also, if war shall come first upon the certain uh, upon the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall help them with all their heart, according to the uh, time shall permit them, and there shall uh, not be given to them that came to their and their either wheat or arms or army or arms, money, and ships that hath deemed good to Romans, that they shall observe their orders, go without deceit. According to these articles did the Roman covenants with the people of the Jews, and after the one party of the other shall have mind to add these articles, and to take away anything they may do in their pleasure, and whatsoever they shall add or take away shall be ratified. Moreover, concerning the evils that Demetrius the king had done against them that were written to him, saying, Why hast thou made thy yoke uh, heavy and upon our friends and our allies the Jews? If therefore they come again to us, commanding of thee, we will do them justice, and we will make war against thee by the sea and land. In the meantime, when Demetrius heard Nicanor and his army were fallen in battle, he sent again Bacchides and Alcimus into Judea, and the right wing of his army with him, and they took the road that leadeth to Galgal, and they camped in Masaloth, which is in Arabella, and they made themselves masters of it, and slew many people. In the first month of the 152nd year, they brought the army to Jerusalem, and they arose and went to Bera with 20,000 men and 2,000 horsemen. Now Judas had pitched his tents in Laishia, and 3,000 chosen men with him, and they saw the multitude of the army, and when many, and they were seized with great fear, and many withdrew themselves out of the camp, and there remained of them no more than 8,000 men, or 800 men. And Judas saw that his army slipped away, and the battle pressed upon him, and his heart was cast down, because he had not the time to gather them together, and he was discouraged. Then he said to them that remaineth, Let us arise and go against our enemies, if we may be able to fight against them. But they dissuaded him, saying, We shall not be able, but let us save our lives now, and return to our brethren, and then we will fight against them, for we are but a few. Then Judas said, God forbid we should do this thing and flee away from them. But if our time be come, let us die manfully for our brethren, and let us not stain our glory. And the army removed out of the camp, and they stood over against them, and the horsemen were divided into two troops, and slingers, and archers, and went before them. And they that were in front were all the men of valor. And Bacchides was in the right wing and the legion drew near on the two sides, and they sounded the trumpets. And they that were on Judas' side, they also cried out, and the earth shook for the noise of the armies. And the battle was fought from morning until evening. And Judas perceived that the stronger part of the army of Bacchides was on the right side, and all the stout heart came together with him, and the right wing was discomfited by them, and he pursued them even to the Mount Astotus. And they that were on the left wing saw that the right wing was discomfited, and they followed after Judas, and them that were with him at their back. And the battle was hard fought, and there fell many wounded of one side and the other. And Judas was slain, and the rest fled away. And Jonathan and Simon took Judas their brother, and buried him to the sepulchre of their fathers in the city of Modin. And all the people of Israel bewailed him with great lamentation, and they mourned for him many days, and said, How is the mighty man fallen that saved the people of Israel? But the rest of the words of the wars of Judas, and the noble acts that he did, and his greatness are not written, for they were very many. And it came to pass that after the death of Judas, the wicked began to put forth their heads in the confines of Israel, and all the workers of iniquity rose up. In those days there was a very great famine, and they and all their country yielded to Bacchides. And Bacchides chose the wicked men and made them lords of the country. And they sought out and made the, the diligent search after the friends of Judas, and brought them to Bacchides. And he took vengeance upon them, and he abused them. And there was a great tribulation of Israel, such as not uh, since this day, that were no prophet seen in Israel. And all the friends of Judas came together and said to Jonathan, since thy brother Judas died, there is not a man like him to go forth against our enemies, Bacchides, and them that are the enemies of our nation. Now therefore we are the chosen, thee this day to be our prince and the captain in his stead, to fight our battles. So Jonathan took up upon him the government of that time, and rose up in the place of Judas his brother. And Bacchides had the knowledge of it, and sought to kill him. Jonathan and Simon his brother knew it, and all that were with them, and they fled to the desert of Thekua, and they pitched by the water of the lake of Asphar. And Bacchides understood it, and he came himself with all his army over the Jordan on the Sabbath day. And Jonathan sent his brother, a captain of the people, to desire the Nubu, the Nabuthenians, his friends, and that they would lead lend their equipage, which was copious. And the children of Jamberai came forth out of Madab, and took John and all that he had, and went away with them. And this was told Jonathan and Simon his brother, that the children of Jamberai made a great marriage, and were bringing the bride out of Madaba, and the daughter of one of the great princes of Canaan, with great pomp. And they remembered the blood of John their brother, and they went up and hid themselves under the covert of the mountain. And they lifted up their eyes, and saw, and behold, the tumult, and the great preparations, and the bridegroom came forth, and his friends, and his brethren, to meet them with their timbrels, and the musical instruments, and the many weapons. And they rose up against them from the place where they lay in ambush, and slew them. And there fell many wounded, and the rest fled into the mountains, and they took all their spoils. And the marriage was turned into mourning, and the noise of their musical instruments into lamentation. And they took revenge for the blood of their brother, and they returned to the bank of the Jordan. And Bacchides heard of it, and he came on the Sabbath day even to the banks of the Jordan with great power. And Jonathan said to his company, let us arise and fight against our enemies, for it is now for it is not now as of yesterday and the day before. For behold, the battle is before us, and the water of the Jordan on the side, and that side the banks of the marshes from the woods, and there is no place for us to turn aside. Now therefore cry ye to heaven, and ye may be delivered from the hand of your enemy. and they joined battle. And Jonathan stretched forth his hand to strike Bacchides, but he turned away from his backwards. And Jonathan and they were with him leaped into the Jordan and swam over the Jordan to them. And there fell Bacchides aside that day 1,000 men, and they returned to Jerusalem. And they built strong cities in Judea, and the fortress that was in Jericho, and Emmaus, and Bethoron, and Bethel, and Themnata, and Phara, and Thopo, and with the high walls and gates and bars. And he placed garrisons in them, that they might wage war against Israel. And he fortified the city of Bethshura and Gazara, and the castle, and set garrisons in them, and provisions of victuals. And he took the sons of the chief men in the country for hostages, and put them in the castle in Jerusalem in custody. Now, in the year 153 of the second month, Alchemus commanded the walls of the inner court of the sanctuary to be thrown down, and the works of the prophets to be destroyed. And he began to destroy. At that time Alchemus was struck, and his works were hindered, and his mouth was stopped, and he was taken with palsy, so that he could no more speak a word and give order concerning his house. And Alchemus died at the time of the great torment. And Bacchides saw that Alchemus was dead, and he returned to the king. The land was quiet for 2 years. And all the wicked held a council, saying, Behold, Jonathan and they that are with him dwell at ease, and without fear. Now therefore let us bring Bacchides thither, and he shall take them all at one night. So they went and gave him counsel, and he rose to come with a great army. And he sent secretly letters to the adherents that were in Judea to siege upon Jonathan and them that were with him. But they could not, nor for their design was known to them. And he apprehended of the men of the country that were the principal authors of the mischief 50 men, and slew them. Jonathan and Simon and they that were with him retired to Beth Besan, which is in the desert, and he repaired the branches thereof, and they fortified it. And Bacchides knew it. He gathered together all his multitude, and went and sent the word to them that were in Judea. And he came and camped above Bethsan, and fought against it many days, and made engines. But Jonathan left his brother Simon in the city, and went forth into the country, and came with a number of men, and struck Ordares and his brethren, and the children of Phaseron in their tents. And he began to slay, and increase their forces. But Simon and they that were with him sallied out of the city, and burnt the engines. And they fought against Bacchides, and he was discomfited by them, and they afflicted him exceedingly. For this counsel and his enterprise was in vain. And he was angry with the wicked men, and he had given them counsel to come into their country. And he slew many of them, and he purposed to return with the rest of their country. And Jonathan had knowledge of it, and he sent ambassadors to him, make peace with him, and to restore to him the prisoners. And he accepted it willingly. And he did according to his words. And he swore that he would do no harm all the days of his life. And he restored to him the prisoners which he had taken out of the land of Judah. And he returned and went away into his own country. And he came no more into their borders. So the sword ceased from Israel. Jonathan dwelt in Machabees, and Jonathan began there to judge the people, and he destroyed the wicked out of Israel. Now, in 160th year, Alexander, son of Antiochus, surnamed the Illustrious, came up and took uh, Palladius, and they received him, and he reigned there. King Demetrius heard of it, and gathered together an exceedingly great army, and went forth against him to fight. And Demetrius sent a letter to Jonathan with peaceable words to magnify him. And he said, let us first make a peace with him, before he make one with Alexander against us. For he will remember all the evils that we have done against him, and against his brother, and against his nation. And he gave him authority to gather together an army to make arms, and that he should be uh, a confederate. And the hostages that were in the castle he commanded to be delivered to him. And Jonathan came to Jerusalem and read the letters in hearing of all the people, and of them they were in the castle. And they were struck with great fear, because they had heard that the king had given them authority to gather together an army. And the hostages were delivered to Jonathan, and he restored them to their parents. And Jonathan dwelt in Jerusalem, and began to build and repair the city. And he ordered the workmen to build the walls, Mount Zion round about the square stones for the fortification. So they did. And the strangers that were in the strongholds which Machabees had built fled away, and every man left his place and departed into his own country. Only in Bethshura remained some of them that had forsaken the law and the commandments of God, for this was the place of refuge for them. And the king Alexander heard of the promises that Demetrius had made Jonathan, and they told him of the battles and the worthy acts that he and his brethren had done, and the labors that they had endured. And he said, shall we find such another man? Now therefore we will make him our friend and our confederate. So he wrote a letter and sent it to him according to these words, saying, King Alexander, to his brethren Jonathan, greetings. We have heard of thee that thou art a man of great power, and fit to be our friend. Now therefore we make thee this day a high priest of thy nation, and thou be called the king's friend. And he sent him a purple robe and a crown of gold, that thou be of one mind with us in our affairs, and keep our friendship with us. Then Jonathan put on the holy vestments in the 7th month in the year 160, at the feast day of tabernacles, and he gathered together an army and made a great number of arms. And Demetrius heard these words, and was exceedingly angry, and said, what is this that we have done, that Alexander hath prevented us to gain the friendship of the Jews, to strengthen himself? And I will write to them words of requests, and offer dignities and gifts, so they may be with me to aid me. And he wrote to them And these words, King Demetrius, to the nation of the Jews greeting, whereas you have kept covenants with us, and have continued in our friendship, and have not joined with our enemies. We have heard of it, and are glad. Wherefore, now continue still to keep fidelity towards us, and we will reward you with good tidings, for you have done in our behalf, and we will remit to you many charges, and will give you gifts. And now I free you and all the Jews from the tribunes, and I release you from the customs of salts, and remit the crowns, and the third of the seed, and the half of the fruit of the trees, which is my share. I leave to you from this day forward, so that it shall not be taken out of the land of Judah, and of the 3 cities which are added thereof out of Samaria and Galilee, from this day forth and forever. And let Jonathan be holy and free with the leaders thereof, and let the tents and the tribunes be for itself. I yielded up the power of the castle that is in Jerusalem, and I gave it to the high priest, and the place therein such men he shall choose to keep it. And every man, or in every soul of the Jew that hath been carried away captive from the land of Judah in all my kingdom, I set liberty free, and all their discharge from the tribune, even of their cattle. And I that all the feasts of the Sabbaths and the new moons and the days appointed, the 3 days before the solemn day, the 3 days after the solemn day, and all the days of immunity and freedom for all the Jews that are in the kingdom, and no man shall have the power to do anything against them, or to molest them in any cause. And let there be enrolled in the king's army, to the number of the 30,000 of the Jews, and the allowance shall be made with them as due to all the king's forces, and contain them shall be appointed to be the fortresses of the great king. And some of them shall be set over the affairs of the kingdom, and there are the trusts, and let the governors be taken from amongst themselves, and let them walk in their own laws, as the king hath commanded in the land of Judah. And 3 cities that had added by Judea out of the country of Samaria, let them be accounted with Judea, and that were under one, and to obey other authority, but to obey no other authority but that of the high priest, and Polemius, and the confines thereof I give as a free gift to the holy places that are in Jerusalem for the necessary charges of holy things. And I give every year 15,000 sickles of silver out of the king's accounts, and what belongs to me, and all that is above which they were over the affairs and the years before had not paid from the time they gave it to the works of the house. More over the 5,000 sickles of silver, which were received from the count of holy places every year, shall also belong to the priests uh, execute the ministry, and And whoever shall flee into the temple that is in Jerusalem and all the borders thereof, being indebted to the king for any matter, let them be set at the liberty, and all that have in my kingdom let them have it free. For the building also, or repairing the works of the holy places, and the charges shall be given out of the king's revenues. For the building also the walls of Jerusalem and the fortifying thereof round about, the charges shall be given out of the king's accounts, and as also for the building of the walls of Judea. Now when Jonathan and his people heard these words, they gave no credit to them, nor received them, because they remembered the great evil they had done in Israel, for he had afflicted them exceedingly, and their inclinations towards Alexander, because he had been in the chief promoter of peace in their regard, and in him they always helped. And the king Alexander gathered together a great army and removed his camp near to Demetrius. And the two kings joined battle, and the army of Demetrius fled away, and Alexander pursued after them and pressed them close. And the battle was hard fought till the sun went down, and Demetrius was slain that day. Alexander sent ambassadors to Ptolemy, king of Egypt, with words to the effect, saying, "Forasmuch as I am returning unto my kingdom, and am sent to the throne of my ancestors, and have gotten the dominion, and have overthrown Demetrius in the possession of and possessed our country, and have joined the battle with him, and both he and his army have been destroyed by us, and we are placed in the throne of his kingdom. Now therefore let us make friendship with one another, and give me now thy daughter to wife, and I will be thy son-in-law, and I will give both thee and her gifts worthy of thee." And King Ptolemy answered, saying, "Happy is the day wherein thou didst return to the land of thy fathers, and satisfy the throne of their kingdom. And now I will do to thee as thou hast written, but meet me as at Ptolemais, and we will see one another, and I give her to thee as thou hast said." And Ptolemy uh, went out of Egypt, and Cleopatra his daughter, and he came to Ptolemais in the 162nd year. And King Antiochus met him and gave him his daughter Cleopatra, and he celebrated her marriage at Ptolemais with great glory, after the manner of the kings. And King Alexander wrote to Jonathan that he should come and meet him, and he went honorably to Ptolemais, and he met there two kings, and he gave them much silver and gold, and the priests, and he found favor in their sight. And some pestilent men of Israel, wicked of a life, uh, men of a wicked life, assembled themselves together against him to accuse him, and the king gave him no heed to them. And he commanded that Jonathan's garments should be taken off, and that he should be clothed with purple, and they did so. And the king made him sit by himself. And he said to the princes, "Go, and with him into the midst of the city, make proclamation that no man complaineth against him of any matter, and thou no trouble him for any manner of. So, so when his ancestors saw his glory and proclaimed that he had clothed his with the people, they fled away, and the king manifested himself and enrolled him against his chief friends and made him governor and partaker of his dominion. And Jonathan returned into Jerusalem with peace and joy. In the year 165, Demetrius, the son of Demetrius, came from Crete into the land of his fathers, and King Alexander heard of it, and which much troubled and returned to Antioch. And King Demetrius made Apollonius his general, who was governor of Cilicia, and he gathered together a great army and came to Jamni. And he sent to Jonathan the high priest, saying, Thou alone standest against us, and I laughed at it, and reproached, because thou showest thy power against us on the mountains. Now therefore, if thou trustest in thy forces, come down to us into the plain, and there let us try one another, for for me is the strength of war. Ask and learn who I am, and the rest that help me, and who also say that your foot cannot stand before our face. For thy fathers have rejoiced, or thy fathers have twice been put to flight in their own land. And now, how wilt thou be able to abide the horsemen and the great army in the plain, wherein there is no stone, nor rock, nor plain to place to flee to? Now, when Jonathan heard the words of Polonius, he was moved in his mind, and he chose the 10,000 men, and he went out of Jerusalem. And Simon, his brother, met him and helped him. They had pitched their tents near the Jope, where they had shut him down by the city, where because the garrison of Polonius was in Jamni, and he had uh, yeah, and they pitched their tents near the Jope, and they shut him out of the city because a garrison of Polonius was in Joppe, and he had led a siege to it. And they that were in the city, being affrighted, opened the gates to him. So Jonathan took Joppe, and Apollonius heard of it, and he took the 3 dames, horsemen, and a great army, and he went to Astotus, one of the that was making the journey, and immediately he went forth into the plain, because he had a great number of horsemen and trusted in them. And Jonathan followed after him to Astotus, and they uh, joined the battle. But Apollonius left privately in the camp 1,000 horsemen behind, and Jonathan knew that there was an ambush behind him, and they surrounded him, his army, and cast darts at him, people from morning until evening. But the people stood still as Jonathan had commanded them, and so their horses were fatigued. Horses were fatigued. Sorry. Then Simon drew forth his army and afflicted the legion for one horsemen were appointed, and they were discomfited by them and fled. And they that were scattered that plain fled, fled into the Astutus and went into the Bath Dagon. There the idol's temple. There was to save themselves. But Jonathan set fire to Astutus and the cities that were round about it, and took the spoils of them that were in the temple of Dagon, and all them that were fled into the burnt with the fire, until they were slain by the sword. And with them that were in the beast, um, they were that were burnt were also caught, uh, also 8,000 men. Jonathan moved his army from thence, commanded against the Ascalon, and they went out of the city to meet with him in great honor. And Jonathan returned into Jerusalem, and with his people, having many spoils. And it came to pass that when Alexander the king being heard these words, that he honored Jonathan yet more, and he sent him a buckle of gold, as the custom is to be given much to such are the royal blood. And he gave him a carrion and all the borders thereof, and in possession. And the king of Egypt gathered together a great army, like the sand that lieth upon the seashore, and the many ships, and he sought to get the kingdom of Alexander by deceit, and yet join it his own people. And he went forth out of Syria and the peaceful words, and they opened to him the cities and met him. The king Alexander had ordered them to go forth and to meet him, because he was his father-in-law. Now when Ptolemy entered into the cities, he put garrisons of the soldiers into every city. And when it came near to Astudius, they showed him the temple of Dagon, and it was burnt with fire. Astudius and the suburbs thereof were destroyed, and the bodies that were cast abroad in their graves, and they that were there were slain in the battles in the battle, and they that were made near the way. And they told the king of that Jonathan had done these things to make him odious, and the king held his peace. And Jonathan came to meet the king at Joppe with glory, and they saluted one another, and they lodged there. And Jonathan went with the king as far as the river called Eleutherius, and he returned to Jerusalem. And King Ptolemy got the dominion of the cities by the seaside, even to Seleucia, and he devised evil designs against Alexander. And he sent ambassadors to Demetrius, saying, Come, let us make a league between us, and I'll put thee, my daughter whom Alexander hath, and thou shalt reign in the kingdom of thy father. For I repent that I have given him my daughter, for he hath sought to kill me. And he slandered him, because he coveted his kingdom. And he took his daughter, and gave her to Demetrius, and alienated himself from Alexander, and his enmities were made manifest. And Ptolemy entered into Antioch, and the two crowns upon his head that were in Egypt and of Asia. And the king Alexander was in Sicilia at the time, because they were in those places that had rebelled. And when Alexander heard of it, he came to give him battle, and King Ptolemy brought forth his army. And he met him with a strong power, and he put to flight. And Alexandria fled into Arabia. There he protected the king Ptolemy was being exalted, and Zabdiel the Arabian took the Alexander's head and sent it to Ptolemy, and the king Ptolemy died the third day after, and they that were on the strongholds were destroyed by they that were with the camp. And Demetrius reigned in the 160th year. In these days Jonathan gathered together with them that were in Judea, and to take the castle that were in Jerusalem, and they made many changes of war against it. Then some of the wicked men that hated their own nation went away to King Demetrius, and told him that Jonathan was besieging the castle. And when he had heard it, he was angry, and forthwith he came to um, Ptolemy, and wrote to Jonathan that he should not besiege the castle, but should come to him in haste and speak to him. But when Jonathan was uh, heard this, he bade them besiege it still, and shall he shall and he bade them to besiege it still, and he chose some of the ancients of Israel and the priests, and he put himself in danger. He took gold and silver and the raiment of many other presents, and he went to the king to Ptolemais, and he found favor in his sight. And certain wicked men of the nation made complaints against him, and the king treated him as his predecessors had done before, and he exalted him in the sight of all his friends, and he confirmed him in the high priesthood and all the honors he had before, and he made him the chief of his friends. And Jonathan requested of the king that he would make Judea free from the tribute, and these three governments, and Samaria and the confines thereof, and he promised him 300 talents. And the king consented, and he wrote letters to Jonathan of all these things to this effect: King Demetrius to his brother Jonathan, and to the nations of the Jews, greeting. We send you here a copy of the letter which we have written to Blasthenes, our parents, concerning you, that you might know it. King Demetrius to Blasthenes, his parent, greetings. We have determined to do good to the nation of the Jews, who are our friends, and keep things that are just with us for their goodwill which they bear towards us. And we have ratified before unto them all the borders of Judea, and the three cities of Phrygia, Lydia, and Ramathia, which were added to Judea out of Samaria, and all their confines, to be set apart to all of them that sacrificed in Jerusalem, instead of the payments which the king received of them every year, and for the first fruits of the land, the fruits of the land and of the trees. And as far as the other things that belong to us, as of tithes and of tributes, from this time we discharge them of them, and the salt pans also, and the crowns, and were presented to us, and we give all to them. Nothing hereof shall be revoked from the time forth and forever. And now therefore see that thou art make a copy of these things, and let it be given to Jonathan, and set upon the holy mountains in a conspicuous place. And King Demetrius, seeing that the land was quiet before him, and nothing resisted him, sent away all his forces, every man to his own place, except the foreign army, which he had drawn together from the islands of the nations. To all the troops of the fathers hated him. And now there was one Tryphon, who had been of Alexander's party before, seeing all the army murmured against Demetrius, went to Emalchiel the Arabian, who brought up the Antiochus, the son of Alexander, and he pressed him much to deliver him to him, and that he might be king in his father's place. And he told him all that Demetrius had done, and how his soldiers hated him, and remained there many days. And Jonathan sent King Demetrius, desiring that he would cast out them that were in the castle in Jerusalem, and these that were in the strongholds, because they fought against Israel. And Demetrius said to Jonathan, saying, I will not only do this for thee, but for thy people, but I will greatly honor thee and thy nation when the opportunity shall serve. And therefore thou shalt do well if thou send me men to help me, for all my army is gone from me. And Jonathan sent him 3,000 valiant men to Antioch, and they came to the king, and the king was very glad of their coming. And they were of the city assembled themselves together to the number of 120,000 men, and would have killed the king. And the king fled into the palace, and they of the city kept the passages of the city, and they began to fight. And the king called the Jews to his assistance, and they came to him all at once, and they all dispersed themselves through the city. And they slew in that day 100,000 men, and they set fire to the city, and got many spoils that day, and delivered the king. And they that were in the city saw that the Jews had got the city as they would, and were discouraged in their mind, cried to the king, making supplication, and saying, Grant us peace, and let the Jews cease from assaulting us in the city. And they that were thrown down from their arms, and made peace. And the Jews were uh, glorified in the sight of the king, and the sight of all that were in the realm, and were renowned throughout the kingdom, and returned to Jerusalem with many spoils. So King Demetrius set the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. And he falsified all whatsoever he had said, and alienated himself from Jonathan. And he did not reward him according to the benefits he had received from him, but gave him great trouble. And after this Tryphon returned, and with him Antiochus the young boy, who was made king, and put on the diadem. And there assembled unto him all the hands which Demetrius had sent away, and they fought against Demetrius, who had turned his back and fled. And Tryphon took the elephants and made himself master of Antioch. And the young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, saying, I confirm thee in the high priesthood, and I appoint thee ruler over the 4 cities, and to be one of the king's friends. And he sent to him vessels of gold for service, and he gave him leave to drink in gold, and to be clothed in purple, and to wear a golden buckle. And he made his brother Simon governor from the borders of Tyre, even to the confines of Egypt. Then Jonathan went forth and passed through the cities beyond the river. And all the forces of Syria gathered themselves to help him, and he came to Ascalon, and they met him honorably out of the city. And he went from thence to Gaza, and there the word Gaza shut him out, and they besieged it, and they burnt all the suburbs around about, and he took the spoils. And the men of Gaza made supplication to Jonathan, and he gave them the right hand, and he took their sons for the hostages, and sent to them Jerusalem. And he went through the country as far as Damascus. And Jonathan heard that the generals of Demetrius were come treacherously to Cadiz, which is in Galilee, and with a great army proposing to remove him from the affairs of the kingdom. And he went against them, but left his brother Simon in the country. And Simon encamped against Bethshura, as assaulted it many days, and shut them up. And they desired him to make peace, and he granted them that he cast them out of thence. And he took the city, and placed it in a garrison in it. And Jonathan and his army encamped by the water of Gesnar, and before it was lights, that they were ready in the plain of Asor. And behold, the army of the strangers met him in the plain, and they laid an ambush for him in the mountains. But he went out against them, and they that lay in ambush rose out for their place in joint battle. And all that were in on Jonathan's side fled, and none was left of them. But Matthias, the son of um, Absalom, and Judas, the son of Calphi, chief captain of the army, and Jonathan rent his garments, and cast forth upon his head, and prayed. And Jonathan turned again to them in battle, and he put them to flight, and they fought. And they of his part that fled saw this, they turned again to him, and they that all with him pursued the enemies, even to Cadiz, to their own camp, and they came even thither. And there fell the aliens in the day 3,000 men, and Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. And Jonathan saw that the time served, and he chose certain men and sent them to Rome, and confirmed and renewed the amity with them. He sent letters to the Spartans and other places according to the same form. And they went to Rome and entered into the Senate house and said, Jonathan the high priest and the nation of the Jews have sent us a renew the amity and the alliance that it was before. And they gave them letters to their governors in every place to conduct them into the land of Judea with peace. And this is the copy of the letters which Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. Jonathan the high priest and the uh, ancients of the nation and the parents and the rest of the people of the Jews to the Spartans, their brethren, greeting. There were letters sent long ago to Onias the high priest from Arius, who reigned then over among you, to signify that you and are our brethren, as the copy here underwritten doth specify. And Ananias received the ambassador with honor, and received the letters wherein there was mention made of the alliance and of enmity. We, though, needed none of these things, having for our comfort the holy books that are in our hands, chose rather to send to you to renew the brotherhood and friendship, lest we should become strangers to you altogether, for there is a long time past since you sent to us. We therefore at all times, without ceasing, both in our festivals and other days, wherein it is convenient to remember you and the sacrifices that we offer and our observances, as is meet and becoming to remember the brethren, and we rejoice at your glory. But we have had many troubles and wars on every side, and the kings that are round about us have fought against us. But we would not be troublesome to you, nor to the rest of our allies and the friends of these wars. For we have had help from heaven, and we have been delivered, and our enemies are humbled. And we have chosen, therefore, uh, Numenius, the son of Antiochus, and Antipater, the son of Jason, and have sent them to the Romans to renew with them the former enmity and alliance. And we have commanded them to go also to you and salute you, and to deliver you out the letters concerning the renewing of our brotherhood. And now you shall do well to give us an answer hereto. And this is the copy of the letter which we had sent to Onias. Arius, the king of the Spartans, to Onias, the high priest, greeting. It is found in the writing concerning the Spartans and the Jews, that there are brethren, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. And now, since there is come to our knowledge, you do well to write to us of your prosperity. And we also have written back to you that our cattle and our possessions are yours, and yours are ours. We therefore have commanded that these things should be told you. Now Jonathan heard that the generals of Demetrius were come again with a greater army than before to fight against them. And so he went out from Jerusalem and met them from the land of Amath, for he gave them no time to enter into the country. And he sent spies into the camp, and they came back and brought him word that they designed to come upon them in the night. And when the sun was set, Jonathan commanded his men to watch and to be in arms all night long, ready to fight. And he set sentinels round about the camp. And the enemies heard that Jonathan and his men were ready for battle, and they were struck with fear and dread in their hearts, and they kindled fires in their camps. Jonathan and they that were with him knew it not till the morning, for they saw the lights burning. And Jonathan pursued after them, but overtook them not, for they had passed the river Eleutherius. And Jonathan turned upon the Arabians, and that are called Zabadians, and he defeated them, and took the spoils of them. And he went forward and came to Damascus, and he passed through all the country. And Simon also went forth and came as far as Ascalon and the neighboring fortresses, and he turned aside to Joppa and took possession of it. And for he heard that they designed to deliver the hold to them, and he took part with Demetrius, and he put a garrison there to keep it. And Jonathan came back and called together the ancients of people, and he took a resolution with them. And he built fortresses in Judea, and he built up walls in Jerusalem, and he raised them out between the cattle and the city to separate it from the city, and so it might have no communication, and they might neither buy nor sell. And they came together to build up the city, for the wall that was upon the brook towards the east was broken down, and they repaired that which is called Capethilia. And Simon built Adia in the Sephilah and fortified it. And he set up the gates and bars. And when Tryphon had conceived a design to make himself king of Asia and to take the crown, to stretch out his hand against King Antiochus, fearing lest Jonathan would not suffer him, he would fight against him, and he sought to seize upon him and to kill him. So he rose up and came to Bethsan, and Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 men chosen for battle, and he came to Bethsan. Now when Tryphon saw that Jonathan came with a great army, he durst not stretch forth his hand against him, but he received him with honor and commended him to all his friends, and gave him presents, and he commanded his troops to obey him as himself. And he said to Jonathan, Why hast thou troubled all the people, whereas we have no war? Now therefore send them back to their own houses, and choose thee a few men, that we may be with thee, and come with me to Ptolemais, and I will deliver it to thee, and the rest of the strongholds, and the army, and all that you have any charge. I will return to you and go away, for this is the cause of my coming. And Jonathan believed him, and did as he said, and he sent away his army, and they departed into the land of Judea. But he kept with him 3,000 men, of whom he sent 2,000 into Galilee, and 1,000 went into with him. Now as soon as Jonathan entered into Ptolemais, they of Rhiems shut the gates of the city, and took him, and all that they had with him, and they slew him. They slew with the sword. And Tryphon sent an army and horsemen to Galilee, and to the great plain, to destroy all Jonathan's company. They were understood that Jonathan and all that were with him were taken and slain, encouraged one another, and went out ready for battle. Then they that came after them, seeing that they stood for their lives, returned back. Whereupon they all peacefully into the where they all came peacefully into the land of Judah, and they bewailed Jonathan and them that had been with him exceedingly, and Israel mourned with great lamentation. And then all the heathens that were round about them sought to destroy them, for they said, They have no prince, nor any help them, nor any to help them. Now therefore let us make war upon them, and take the memory of them amongst men. Now Simon heard that Tryphon was gathered together a great army to invade the land of Judah, and to destroy it. And seeing that the people was in dread and in fear, he went up to Jerusalem and assembled the people, and exhorted them, saying, You know what great battles I and my brother and the house of my father have fought for the laws. and the sanctuary, and the distresses that we have seen, by reason whereof all my brethren have lost their lives for Israel's sake, and I am left alone. And now far be it from me to spare my life in any time of trouble, for I am not better than my brethren. I will avenge them, my nation, and the sanctuary, and our children, and our wives, and for all the heathens gathered together to destroy us out of mere malice. And the spirit of the people were enkindled as soon as they heard these words. And they answered with a loud voice, saying, Thou art our leader in the place of Judas, and Jonathan thy brother. Fight thou our battles, and we will do whatsoever thou shalt say to us. And so, gathering together all the men of the war, he made haste to finish all the walls of Jerusalem, and he fortified it around about. And he sent Jonathan, the son of Absalom, with him, with a new army into Joppa, and he cast out them that were in it, and they himself remained there. And Tryphon removed from Ptolemais with a great army to invade the land of Judah, and Jonathan was with him in custody. But Simon pitched in Adus over against the plain. Now Tryphon understood that Simon was raised up in the place of his brother Jonathan, and he meant to join the battle with him. He sent messengers to him, saying, We have detained thy brother Jonathan from the money that he owed the king's account, and by reason of the affairs which he had management of. But now send 100 talents of silver, and his 2 sons for hostages, and when he is set at liberty, he may have not revolt from us, and we will release him. Now Simon knew that he spoke deceitfully to him. Nevertheless, he ordered the money and the children to be sent, and he should bring upon himself a great hatred of the people of Israel, who might have said, Because he have not the money and the children, therefore is he lost. So he sent the children and the hundreds of talents, and he lied, and he did not let Jonathan go. And after this, Tryphon entered within the country to destroy it, and they went about by the way that leadeth to Adar. And Simon and his army marched to every place whithersoever they went, and they that were in the castle sent messengers to Tryphon, that he should make haste to come through the desert and send them victuals. And Tryphon made ready all those horsemen, and came that night, but there fell a very great snow, and he came not into the country of Galaad. And when he approached Bashcama, he slew Jonathan and his sons there. And Tryphon soon returned and went to his own country. And Simon sent and took the bones of Jonathan, his brother, and buried them in Modian, in the city of his fathers. And all Israel bewailed him with great lamentation, and they mourned for him many days. And Simon, over the sepulchre of his father and his brother, a building lofty in sight, of polished stone behind and before, and he set up 7 pyramids, one against another, for his father and his mother and his 4 brethren. And About the he set great pillars upon the pillars, arms for the perpetual memory. And by the arms, ships carved, which might be seen by all that sail on the sea. This is the sepulchre that he made, and Modian even unto this day. The Tryphon, when he was upon the journey with the young king Antiochus, treacherously slew him. And he reigned in his place, and he put on the crown of Asia, and brought a great evils upon his land. Simon built up the strongholds of Judea, fortifying them with high towers and great walls and gates and bars, and he stored up victuals in the fortresses. And Simon chose men and sent to King Demetrius to the end that he should grant an immunity to the land, for all that Tryphon did was to spoil. And King Demetrius, in answer to the surplus, wrote a, a letter in this manner: King Demetrius to Simon the high priest and the friend of kings, and to the ancients and to the nations of the Jews, greetings. The golden crown and the palm which you have sent, we have received, and we are already ready to make peace with you, firm peace with you, and write to the king's chief officers to release you the things that we have released, and for all that we have decreed in your favor shall stand in force. The strongholds that you have built shall be your own, and as far as your oversight or fault committing unto this day, we forgive it. And the crown which we owe you, if any other there were taxed in Jerusalem, now let it not be taxed. And if any of you be fit to be enrolled, avenging our cities, or enrolled among our cities, wrong. If any of you be fit to be enrolled among ours, let them be enrolled, and let them there be peace between us. In the year 170, the yoke of Israel, or the yoke of the Gentiles, was taken off of Israel. And the people of Israel began to write in instruments in the public records the first year under Simon the high priest and the great captain and the prince of the Jews. In those days Simon besieged Gaza and encamped around about it. And he made engines and set them into the city, and he struck one tower and he took it. And they that were within the engine leaped into the city, and there was great uproar in the city. And they that were in the city went up with their wives and their children upon the wall, within the garments rent, and they cried with a loud voice, beseeching Simon to the great and grant them peace. And they said, Deal not with us according to our evil deeds, but according to thy mercy. And Simon, being moved, did not destroy them, but yet he cast them out of the city, and cleansed the houses wherein there had been idols. And then he entered into it with hymns, and blessed the Lord. And having cast out of it all the uncleanness, he placed in it men that should observe the law, and he fortified it, and made it its habitation. But when they were in the castle of Jerusalem, were hindered from going out and coming into the country, and from buying and selling, they were straitened with hunger, and many of them perished through the famine. And they cried to Simon for peace, and he granted it to them. And he cast them out of we cast them out thence and cleansed the castle from their uncleanness. And they entered into the 23rd day of the second month in the year 171 with thanksgiving and branches of palm trees and harps and cymbals and psalteries and hymns and canticles, because the great army was destroyed out of Israel. And he ordained in those days that it should be kept every year with gladness. And he fortified the mountain of the temple that was near the castle, and that he dwelt there himself and they that were with him. And Simon saw that John his son was a valiant man for war, and he made him captain of all his forces, and he dwelt in Gazaria. In year 172, King Demetrius assembled his army and went into Media, and to put him succors to the fight against Tryphon. And Arsaces, the king of Persia and Media, heard that Demetrius was entered within the borders, and he sent one of his princesses to take him alive and bring him to him. And he went and defeated the army of Demetrius and took him, and brought him to Arsaces, and he put him into the custody. And all the land of Judea was in the rest of the days of Simon, and he sought the good of his nation, and he brought his power and his glory, pleased them as well all his days. And with his glory, he took Joppa for a haven, and he made an entrance to the isles of the sea, and he enlarged the bounds of the nation, and he made himself master of the country, and he gathered together a great number of captives, and he had uh, dominion of Gazara and Bethshura, and the castle he took away of the uncleanliness out of it, and there was none that resisted him, and every man that tilled his head with peace in the land of Judah yielded her increase, and the trees of the fields and their fruit. The ancient men set all in the streets and treated together all the good things of the land, and the young men put them in glory and the robes of war. And he provided vegetables for for the cities that he appointed, that they should be furnished with ammunition, so the fame of his glory was renowned even to the ends of the earth. And he made peace in the land, and Israel rejoiced with great joy. And every man sat under his vine, under his fig tree, and there was none to make them afraid. And there was none left on the land to fight against them. And the kings discomfited in those days. And when he strengthened all those his people that were brought low, and he sought the law, and he took away every unjust and wicked man. He glorified the sanctuary and multiplied the vessels of holy places. And when he was in Rome, as far as Sparta, and Jonathan was dead, and they were very sorry. And when they had heard that Simon his brother was made high priest in this place, and was possessed of all the country and the cities therein, and wrote to him in the tables of brass, and to renew the friendship of the alliance which they had made with Judas and with Jonathan his brethren, and they that were read before the assembly in Jerusalem. And this is the copy of the letters that the Spartans sent the princes and the cities of the Spartans of Simon, the high priest, and the ancients, and the priests, and the rest of all the people of the Jews, their brethren, greeting. The ambassadors that were sent to our people have told us of your glory and honor and joy, and we rejoiced at their coming, and we are assured what was said by them in the councils of the people in the manner. Uh, Numenius, the son of Antiochus, and Antipater, the son of Jason, uh, ambassador of the Jews, came to us, renewed the former friendship with us, and it pleased the people to receive the men honorably, and to put a copy of their words in a public records to be uh, a memorial to the people of Spartans. And we have written a copy of them to, to Simon the high priest. And after this, Simon and Numenius to Rome with a great shield of gold and of the weight of 1,000 pounds to confirm the league with it. And when the people of Rome had heard these words, they said, what thanks shall we give to Simon and his sons? For he hath destroyed his brethren, and hath driven away in flight the enemies of Israel from them. And they decreed him liberty and registered in all the tables of brass. And he set up the pillars in Zion. And this is the copy of the writing. The 18th day of the month, Elul, in the year 172, being the third year under this Simon the high priest, at as Sarmemiel, in the great assembly, in in the great assembly of the priests, and the people, the princes, and the nation, and the ancients of the country, these things were notified, forasmuch as they have written often been wars in our country, and the nation, the Simon and Matthias, the son of children of Jareb, and the brethren have put themselves in danger and resisted the enemy of their nation for the maintenance of their holy places and the law, and have raised their children to great glory. And now Jonathan gathered together his nation and was made their high priest, and he was laid to rest with his people. And their enemies desired to tread down and destroy the country, and stretch forth their hands against their holy places. And Cyrus resisted and fought for the nation, and shut out the mouth much of the money, and armed, and the valiant men of his nation gave them wages. And he fortified the cities of Judea and Lystra, that he lieth in the borders of Judea, wherein the armor of the enemies was before, and he placed there a garrison of Jews. And he returned to Joppa, which lied on the sea, and Gazera, which uh, which bordereth upon Astos, wherein the enemies dwelt. Therefore, we would therefore uh, before the place the Jews here and furnish them with all things convenient for their reparation. And the people seeing the acts of Simon and what glory he meant to bring his nation, made them their prince and high priest, and became he had done all those things, and for the justice and for the faith which he hath kept his nation, and for he hath sought by the nations by the means to advance his people and his days. These prospered in his hands, and so the heathens were taken away out of their country, and they also were led to the city of David in Jerusalem. And the cattle of which they issued forth profaned all the run round and the sanctuary, and did much evil in its purity. And he placed therein Jews for the defense of the country and of the city. And he raised up the walls of Jerusalem. And King Demetrius confirmed him in the high priesthood. According to these things, he made him his friend and glorified him with great glory. And when he had heard that the Romans had called the Jews their friends and confederates and brethren, and they had received Simon as ambassadors of honor, and that the Jews and their priests had consented that he should be their prince and the high priest forever, till there be should arise a faithful prophet, and he that should be chief over them, and that he would have charge of the sanctuary, and that he should appoint rulers over the workers, and over the country, and over the armor, and over the strongholds, and that he should have care over the holy place, and that he should obey by all, they should be obeyed by all, and that all the writings in the country should be made in his name, and that he should be clothed with people, and that it should not be lawful for any man, for any of the people or any of the priests to disannul any of these things, or or to gainsay his words, or to gather together a assembly in the country without him, or to clothe with purple, or to wear a buckle of gold. And whoever so shall do otherwise, or shall make void any of these things, shall be punished. And it pleased all the people to establish Simon to do according to these words. And Simon, accepted thereof, was well pleased to execute the office of high priest, and to be captain of the prince of the nation of the Jews. And the Pharisees, or the priests, in the to be the chief over all. And they commanded that his warning should be put in the fables of brass, and that he should be set up within the compass of the sanctuary in a conspicuous place. Another copy thereof upon the should be in the treasury, and the Simon and his sons may have it. And King Antiochus, the son of Demetrius, sent letters from the isles of the sea of Simon the priest and the prince of the nation of the Jews and all the people and all the continents there. These the King Antiochus to the Simon the high priest, to the nation of the Jews, greeting, for as much as the certain pestilent men have usurped the kingdom of their fathers, and my purpose is to challenge the kingdom and restore it to the former estate. And I have chosen a great army and have battleships of war. And I design to go through the country, and I may take revenge on them of them that have destroyed our country and that have many cities desolate in my realm. Now therefore I confirm unto thee all the obligations which all the kings before me remitted to thee, and what other gifts soever they remitted to thee. And I give to thee leave to coin thy own money in thy country, and let Jerusalem be holy and free, and all the armor that hath been made, and the fortresses which thou hast built, and which thou keepest in thy hands, let them remain to thee, and all that is due to the king, that which should be the king's and hereafter, from this present and forever, is forgiven thee. And when he shall have recovered our kingdom, we will glorify thee, and the nation, and the people, and the temple, and the great glory, so that your glory shall be made manifest in all the earth. In the year 174, Antiochus entered into the land of the fathers, and all the forces assembled to him, and the few that were left with Tryphon, and King Antiochus pursued after him, after he had fled along by the sea coast, and came to Dora. And he perceived that the evils were gathered together upon him, and his troops had forsaken him. And Antiochus camped above Dora with 120,000 men of war and 8,000 horsemen. And he had invested in the city, and the ships drew near by the sea, and they annoyed the city by land and by sea, and suffered none of them to come in or to go out. And Numenius and they that had been with him came from the city of Rome, having letters written to the king and the countries and the continents, whereof were these: Lucius, the um, in the council of the Romans, to the king of uh, Ptolemy, greetings. Ambassador of the Jews, our friends come to us to renew our former friendship and alliance, and being sent from Simon the high priest and the people of the Jews. And they have brought also the field of guilt of all the thousands pounds. And he hath seemed good, therefore, to us to write the king and the countries that they should do them no harm, nor fight against them, that their cities or countries, that they that they should give up no aid, go no aid to them that fight against them. And Simon, and it hath seemed good to us, they received the shield of them. If therefore any personal men are fled out of their country to you, brethren, or deliver you. If any pestilent men are fled out of their country to you, deliver them to Simon the high priest, and he will punish them according to the law. And these some things were written to King Demetrius and to Alatus and Erathias and Arsacus and all these countries, and Lapscarcus and the Spartans, and the Dolus, and the Midus, and the Sixon, and Caria, and Samos, and Pamphylia, and Lucia, and Alicarnassus, and Cos, and Side, and Ardus, and Rhodes, and Pharisili, or and Gortania, and Gynadius, and Cyprus, and Scenery, and they wrote a copy thereof to Simon the high priest and to the people, the Jews. But Antiochus moved his camp and doors the second time, and assaulting it, continuing that they make engines that you should trifon, and they should go up. And Simon sent to him 2,000 men chosen to aid him, silver also, gold, and abundance of furniture, and that he had made and that he would not receive them, but he broke all the covenants, and that he had made with them before, and alienated himself from them. And when he sent to him Athenobius, one of his friends, to treat with him, saying, You hold Joppa and Gazara, and the castle that is in Jerusalem, which are the cities of my kingdom. There, brethren, you have wasted, and you have made great havoc in the land, and have got the dominion of the places of my kingdom. Now, therefore, deliver up the cities that you have taken up, and the tribunes of the places whereof you have gotten you've gotten the dominion without the powers. But if not, give me for them 500 talents of silver, and for the havoc that you have made, and for the tributes of the cities, another 500 talents, or otherwise we will come and fight against you. And so Athenobius, the king's feared, the king's friend came to Jerusalem and saw the glory of Simon and the magnificence of gold and silver, and gave greetings, and that he was astonished that he told the king the truth. He told the king words. And Simon answered and said to him, We have neither taken other men's land, neither do we hold the which is other men's, but his inheritance from our fathers, which was for some time unjustly possessed by our enemies. But having the opportunity, claim that the inheritance of our fathers, and as they are the complements concerning Joppa and Gazara, they that did great harm to the people and the country, and the year which they and great deal, as contemplates concerning Joppa and Gazara, that they great harm comes to the people and to our country. Yet for those we will give 100 talents. And Athenobius answered him not a word. And returning to the rage, the king made him sport, and these words, and the glory of uh, Simon, and all that he had seen, and the king was exceedingly angry. And Tryphon fled away by the ship to Orthosius, and the king appointed uh, Sendebius, Sendebius, captain of the seacoast, and gave him an army of footmen and horsemen, and he assailed them to the march the great with his army in Judea, and that he commanded him to build up Gendor and to fortify the gates of the city, and to war against the people. But the king himself pursued after Tryphon, and then Shendebius came to Gemini and began to invoke the people and to revenge Judah and to take the people and take the people prisoners and to kill and build and to Gator. And he placed their horsemen in their army, and they might issue forth to make incursions upon the ways of Judea, and as the king had commanded him. Then John came from Gazara and told Simon, his father, what the Gendebius had done against their people. And Simon called his 2 eldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, I and my brethren have my father's house have fought against the enemies of Israel from our youth even to this day, and the things have prospered so well in our hands that we have delivered Israel oftentimes. And now I am old, but be you instead of me and my brethren, and go out and fight for our nation, and help from heaven be with you. Then he chose out of the country 20,000 fighting men, and between and he chose out of the country 20,000 fighting men and horsemen, and they went forth against the Chendeavus, and they resisted. They that rested Moden. And they arose in the morning and went into the plain, and behold, the very great army of the footmen and horsemen came against them, and that running, they were running river between them. And he and his people pitched their camp over against them in its long, and they that were in the afraid to go over the river. And he went over first, and then his men, seeing him, passed over after him. And he divided the people, and he set the horsemen in the midst of the footmen, and the horsemen of the enemies were very numerous. And they yeah, and they sounded the holy trumpet, and Chindaebus and his army were put to flight, and they fell many of them wounded, and the rest fled into the strongholds. And at that time, Judas, John's brother, was wounded, but John pursued after them till he came to Cedron, which he had both. Which he had both. Or which he had built. And they fled even to the towers that were in the fields of Astodes, and he burnt with them with fire, and there fell of them 2,000 men, and he returned into Judea and in peace. Now Ptolemy, the son of Bobus, was appointed the captain of the plain of Jericho, and he had the abundance of silver and gold, for he was the son-in-law of the high priest, and his heart was lifted up, and he designed to make himself master of the country, and he proposed treachery against Simon, and he was getting through the cities that were in the countries of Judea, and now the Simon were there. He was going through the cities, and they were coming in the country of Judea, and were taking care of good orders of them, and went down to Jericho. And he said, Matthias and Judas, his sons, in the year 177th and 11th month, the same is the ninth, is the month, seventh. So, as the son of Abias received them deceitfully into the little fortress, and called Doth, which he had built, he had made them a great feast, and he had men there. And when Simon had his sons and had drunk plentifully, Ptolemy and his sons rose up and took their weapons, and entered into banqueting place, and slew him and his 2 sons and some of his servants. And he came, committing a great treachery in Israel, and he rendered gold for good. Rendered evil for good. And Ptolemy wrote these things and sent to the king that he sent his army to him and to him, or to aid him, and that he would deliver them to the country. He would deliver them from the country and their cities and their tributes. And he sent them into the gallery or Gazaret to kill John. The tribunes uh, that he sent letters to uh, come to him, and that he would give them silver and gold and gifts. And he sent others to make Jerusalem and the mountains of the temple. Now one running before told John and Gazara that his father and his brethren were slain, and that he sent men to kill thee also. But when they heard it, he saw exceedingly afraid. But he apprehended that the man that came to kill him and his put them to death, for he knew that they sought to make him away. And as concerning the rest of the acts of Judas, and his wars, and his worship deeds which he was side of, or which bravely achieved, the buildings of the walls which he made, and the things that he had done, which are things that he did. Behold, these are written in the book of the days of priesthood from the time that which was made high priest ordered together. Behold, they are written, and took these days to the priesthood from the time that he was made high priest after his father. Deo gratias, gloria patri et filio spiritus sancto, sicere rati principum severus et lost.